My name is Jonathan. I'm an ETL developer, and this is the New York City Sidewalk Café project. And this is the data warehouse project that I built for the city of New York and their sidewalk cafe permitting process. What is a sidewalk cafe, right? A sidewalk cafe is pretty much a cafe or a restaurant where a portion of the business is situated on the public sidewalk. As you can see here, in cities like New York City, businesses are often situated right next to other businesses, sharing a wall or under an apartment complex or other businesses. And for customers to be able to receive some of these services that these cafes offer, they often don't have much room to be able to sit down and receive these services. People are usually having to stand up or just taking their coffee to go or using makeshift seating just to be able to sit down and have a cup of coffee. If you've been to any large population dense metropolitan area, space is a very big issue. And to be able to combat that and to be able to expand, small businesses like this only had a viable option of being able to expand onto the public sidewalk, because as you can see, vertically is not really much of an option, horizontally is not really much of an option, and to be able to expand on the current business that they own, the cost per square footage in New York City is very expensive. And certain boroughs like Brooklyn and Manhattan, which are high traffic areas, which is the ideal places for these cafes that they see enough people, it's difficult to be able to purchase more square footage because the cost per square foot can go up to almost $3,000 per square foot. So to be able to combat that, the most viable option that they have is to be able to expand onto these sidewalks. And to do so, they have to submit applications and get permits to be able to use the sidewalk space. And these permits have to go through different stages of review to be approved. They have to go through the New York City City Council, the New York City Planning Commission, the mayor's office, and depending on how much space each one of these cafes are requesting, these applications might even need to go through different hearing processes. And once all of these stages have been complete and all the different levels of review have been complete, only then will these sidewalk cafes be issued a permit to be able to expand onto the public sidewalks. So with that being said, there's a few factors that need to be considered. And some of these factors are that New York City is one of the cities where about 50% of the population still uses public transport. So they're using these sidewalks to be able to commute from different stations, whether it's a bus station or a train station, and just situating your sidewalk cafe onto the public sidewalk without the proper guidelines and review and studies being done can cause issues to pedestrians. As you can see in the lower picture, we have people with disabilities having trouble just to get right across the street because somebody else is sitting down having a cup of coffee. So a few different regulations and studies need to be done before approving or issuing a permit to these sidewalk cafes so they don't impede on the pedestrian walkways and other public services. So when these different city municipalities review these applications, they have to be able to determine if the requested amount of space is adequate, and they have to take their time to be able to review these applications and determine, is there enough pedestrian walkway? Are they blocking off any of the public services like these bus stops or parking meters? And how far are these tables and chairs for this sidewalk cafe expanding onto the sidewalk, and how much room are they actually taking up? And all these different things have to be considered, and it takes time to be able to determine the correct amount of space for each one of these applications. And for them to determine that, they have to really do a lot of reviewing, and they also have to be able to kind of meet the balance of being able to serve both the public and the businesses at the same time. Now, because this is such a long and strenuous process, it becomes an issue. Sorry about that. And the problem is that in the business world, time costs money. And as you can see in this post by the Wall Street Journal, the process of getting one of these permits has become a long and lengthy process and a costly process also. So getting a permit from the city of New York to be able to expand onto the sidewalk in 2014 could take up to almost a year. And the data showed that it took about 264 days just to be able to get one of these applications approved on average in 2014. So with that being an issue and time being an issue, me as a ETL developer, to be able to offer a solution to the city of New York, the solution that I was able to come up with is creating a data warehouse solution where we can take all the different sources of data that they have, import it into an operational database, archive the historical data, and use this historical data to be able to create reports so we can go ahead and get a few metrics, key performance indicators, and be able to develop insights from these. So some of the key performance indicators that we were able to draw from this data warehouse were the average time of permit issuance, the average time of issuance related to hearings, to be able to see the impact of hearings on these permits, to be able to see the average time of issuance compared to the requested square footage, to see the impact of how much square footage impacts the application process, and also to be able to find the minimum and the maximum time of issuance, to find a few outlier applications to be able to use as examples or guidelines to be able to understand these are the criteria that are allowing these applications to get processed faster, or these are the criteria that are making the application process longer. Creating this data warehouse, we started the ETL process by extracting the data from NYCOpenData.com. This is where I got all the data from, in the form of a JSON file. And from the JSON file, I went ahead and parsed this data into using SQL to create a code to be able to view the data so I can put it into my SSIS source. From there, I went ahead and created a staging table. And from the staging table, what I did was I imported this JSON file into my staging table. And once it was inside my staging table, I was able to see all the different columns that were involved with this data and did some preliminary data profiling. From there, I was able to see which columns would be categorized together, maybe grouping them in different departments that are correlated, and to see what type of data I was actually working with. From there, I began transforming the data. So for the transformation, once I did the preliminary data profiling and was able to divide the different columns into separate and related groups, I went ahead and created an ODS database, and from there created all the different grouping tables. And after that, started transforming the data by cleaning it, removing any duplicates or nulls, and making sure the data validation was there to be able to import clean data that will later go into the data warehouse so we can use it for accurate reporting. Once the data had been cleaned and imported into the ODS, and was successfully imported into the ODS, I began creating the data warehouse. In the data warehouse, I determined which of these tables were going to be our dimensions, and which of these tables were going to help us create our facts. Once I was able to determine the different dimension and facts for the data warehouse, I went ahead and loaded all the data into the data warehouse using different transformations like lookups to be able to get all the correct matching records from the different tables and importing them directly into our facts and dimensions. And once the facts and dimensions were set up and the data warehouse was loaded, I was able to create a data model with 2 fact tables and multiple different dimensions, being able to create the relationships between the different dimensions and facts, so the querying process can be much faster. And from this data warehouse, I was able to create those KPIs, and from those KPIs, I was able to go ahead and get some insights, and from the insights, be able to create some suggestions and next steps. For example, from the time of issuance KPI and the time of issuance KPI for the hearings, we were able to determine that the applications that had to go through the hearing process took much longer than applications that didn't have to go through the hearing process. For example, during 2017 to 2019, the number of applications that were being waived had increased about 700%. And from 2017 to just specifically from 2017 to 2018, they had increased about 200%. So this increase in the number of applications that were being waived showed a drastic increase in a drastic decrease in the amount of time the application process took. So from this KPI, we were able to suggest to the different city municipalities to be able to create guidelines for how these applications would be able to avoid the hearing process. So when businesses apply for these permits, they have steps that they can follow to be able to get their permits approved even faster, so they can go ahead and start operating their businesses. From the minimum and max time of application issuance, from this KPI, we were able to find a few outliers. About 90 applications from 2018 to 2020 were able to get processed in one day, go through all the different city municipalities and get all their approvals in 9 days. So these type of outliers gave us a good example to be able to follow, and again, create more guidelines for these small businesses and sidewalk cafes to follow, to be able to create, adjust their applications for these permits so they can follow these different criteria to get their applications approved much faster, just like the 90 applicants that were able to get theirs done in the same day. And then for the KPI for the time of issuance and related to square footage, we were able to identify that the amount of square footage that you apply for drastically did affect the amount of time it took for your application to get approved. In 2018, we can look at the two outliers that we have here. For example, the Hudson LLC was one of the sidewalk cafes that applied for a permit, and they were actually asking for about 1,300 square foot to be able to expand onto the sidewalk, which was the largest amount of square footage that was being applied for within that year. And that increased their the number of days that they had, the number of days it took for their application to get approved from the average of 168 days to 198 days, versus Eat Madison LLC, which only asked for about 20 square feet. They were able to get their application approved in 7 days versus 168, which was the average. And we were able to develop these type of next suggestions, insights, and these KPIs by building this data warehouse. And that is the data warehouse I built for the New York City Sidewalk Cafe. Thank you guys for your time. Let me know if you have any questions.
Like a flight with no visa, first class with the seat back, I still see ya.